Well, let's talk now to Ahmed Soliman. He's from the Africa programme at Chatham House in London. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme. So the protesters then are demanding more change here, just worried that the Defence Minister is more of the same. I mean, do you think he is just more of the same?
He certainly is an establishment figure. He's someone who's been part of the regime, been part of the armed forces for his entire career. And until, of course, yesterday, someone who was a President Bashir loyalist, who President Bashir had brought in as the defense minister and the first vice president, specifically, I think, to insulate him, to provide backing for the military and the armed forces for his announcement of a state of emergency. Seeing him as a transitional interim leader, I think, is difficult for a lot of Sudanese, particularly for the protesters who are calling for a legitimate transition to a civilian administration.
How stable do you think he is as well? I mean, we're getting reports of divisions within the army. It's also a country, of course, with paramilitary forces, different security forces as well.
Well, these forces, in large part, have come together to determine this outcome of the Transitional Military Council. In terms of the leadership of these forces, be it the intelligence, be it some of the paramilitaries that you're talking about, and also, of course, the armed forces, they have been singing from the same hymn sheet on this regard. We don't know exactly what the divisions and the competition between those individuals topping those institutions are in terms of who is going to lead this, but it seems as if the army has ascended in that position and has the more legitimate claim to that position. But of course, that's not what also the middle-ranking officers within the army have been supporting. I think, as you've seen, the protests have continued, and the sit-in in front of the military headquarters in Khartoum and elsewhere has continued. I think a general sense of expectation has resumed following moving beyond the 10 p.m. curfew.
And talking about that curfew, I mean, the curfew, as you say, was supposed to come in at 10 o'clock last night, but the protesters have stayed on the streets. How safe do you think they are? I mean, do you think there could be some kind of crackdown if they decide to remain there longer term?
I think the initial idea of this renewed military government and state of emergency has been to try and quell the protests, to try and dissipate them and provide them with some assurances about the way forward. That seemingly isn't working. You've heard from the SPA, and they're likely to remain in position until their demands are met. This means we're getting more attritional, even more attritional in terms of the battle between the streets and between those in the leadership in Sudan. That could potentially lead to violent crackdown if the army, if the security forces decide that their tactic of changing the government towards a transition hasn't paid dividends.
Ahmed Soliman, thanks very much for being with us on the programme today, joining us there from London from the Africa programme at Chatham House. Thanks very much.